getting them into work, and
Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's my pleasure to take a call on the social development and housing sector, because I think when we look at Budget 2016, we can see the clear denial from this government that we are in the middle of a housing crisis, that we can see that the Kiwi dream of home ownership is slipping away from more and more New Zealanders, Mr. Chairman. And I think if you actually have a look at the government's activity post-budget and the flailing around on the issue of housing that we have seen, with bungled announcement after bungled announcements, some of them by tweet, that we've seen from this government, that we see that this is a government that has no answers to the housing crisis. And Mr. Chairman, I want to take issue with the comments that the member for Waimakariri, Matt Ducey, made in his speech, because I think what we had there was another example of post-fact politics, where we have the repetition of the idea that Christchurch and Canterbury can be held up as some kind of exemplar of how things can be done to solve the housing crisis. And Mr. Chairman, this really speaks to the fact that this government doesn't get it, that what was in Budget 2016 and the bungling about since then really isn't going to address the problems we have with housing in this country. So we had this holding up of exemplar with Matt Ducey saying that we only had single-digit growth in house prices in the Canterbury region in the last financial report. That may be the case, but let's look at the biggest picture. The period of hyperinflation before that has seen house prices in the Canterbury region rise by more than 30% on pre-quake levels. And Mr. Chairman, if that is what this government thinks is affordability and having a good hand on the tiller of housing, then we really are in trouble. And that is what we have been saying, that this is what they think equals success and what they think that can be held up as an exemplar. When housing is has risen 5.5 times the median income in Canterbury, that this will be held up as some kind of exemplar. This speaks to a government that has absolutely failed on the issue of housing. That what we do have in Canterbury, and I'm dumbfounded that Mr. Ducey doesn't see it in his own electorate office, is that we have an ongoing issue with overcrowding. We have an ongoing issue with more and more Cantabrians being shut out of ever hoping to own their own home. Because Mr. Ducey, when you're going to get a mortgage, inflation of 30% over 6 years makes things unaffordable for many New Zealanders. For many New Zealanders, that puts the dream of home ownership out of their reach. And more Cantabrians have been put out of reach. In the 8 years that this government has been in power, they have done nothing to address the housing crisis, and they have exacerbated it. But Mr. Chairman, a month ago, Labor celebrated its 100th birthday. And we didn't just look at our glorious past, we actually talked about a bold vision for the future. We talked about what we're going to do in our next 100 years, and tackling the housing crisis is one of those. We talked about setting up an affordable housing authority. And Mr. Chairman, when we look at how this will play out in Christchurch in terms of the way in which the money in Budget 2016 could have been used, Mr. Chairman, alternative ways that it could have been used, you see that there is an alternative way. If you take the issue of the East Frame in Christchurch, where this government will claim a victory, despite this is another bungled anchor project that is sitting with nothing happening on it after one already residential anchor project has already fallen over. We could do this in a different way. We could have a government that wasn't content to sit back, make some zoning decisions and think that houses will magically appear. What we could have is a government that was willing to work alongside developers to make sure that we actually get houses built. And if we take the residential development that was planned for the East Frame, which is around 900 inner city apartments, which I think is actually a pretty exciting prospect for Christchurch and something that I want to see built. I think that we can look at alternative ways that this could be done, Mr. Chairman, that we could see that we wouldn't rely on traditional development models like this government has done. This government is so stuck in 20th century thinking that is out of ideas and isn't willing to look at different ways of doing stuff, instead is content to see project fall over.